Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, January the 8th of the year 2024. This is the first podcast episode of 24. Wow. If there was an applause sound bit.
Wait, this is the second one.
Yeah, no, but I meant recording. If there was an applause sound bit, I would highly encourage Brian to insert that here. It's been a while. We're back. Who says we're back? Guess who? Guess who says we're back? Who says that? Come on, man.
I don't know.
It's Mr. Virgil Walker himself. He always says we're back. And I'm only saying that because he will be in our podcast recording next week, which is pretty exciting. So if you listen to Just Thinking podcast and then you listen to ours real back to back real quick, it'll almost sound the same except one person will be gone and one person will be added. And so next week's episode will be a live recording from the men's retreat with Pastor Virgil Walker himself. But today we have a big episode. Big. How was your holidays, Pastor Eugene? By holidays, I mean Christmas and New Year's. I'm not trying to go into the whole
No other
world.
holidays.
No, I'm just saying, like, how was that whole week for you? Busy week.
It was good. I mean, now that it's over,
Yeah.
we are in the season of Epiphany, and it's going to be fun. Yeah, it's a lot of time of learning and growing.
Oh, wow. What's the Epiphany?
What is the Epiphany season? Jansuki Bibi.
It's after Christmas and New Year's.
I could have gathered that from what he just said. Yeah, so we are in the season of Epiphany. And Happy New Year, everybody. And with the new year, we have the new jingle. So you heard that new jingle is very funky. Like you kind of want to groove to it a little bit. But hopefully you weren't dancing too hard.
Wait, doesn't the
when you were
jingle come
driving.
after this?
Yo, you are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Here comes the jingle. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
I'm Jun Suk.
I'm Eugene Kim.
Wow, that was good. That was nice. When we get 3 for 3, it's always a blessing. But yeah, you heard that new jingle, and I'm sure you wanted to like dance a little bit, but hopefully not too much because you're driving. So it's a funky jingle, and we have a new logo. So a lot of new things this upcoming year, the year of 2024. Speaking of new, we are still, we have a couple more slots for the merch. You know, the moment that an episode went out 2 weeks ago, we started getting a flood of emails. A flood. Almost too many. And the merch is coming, but we have room for a couple more. So if the Dear Church podcast was number 1 on your Spotify Wrapped, please send us a picture of that for this brand new, very nice merchandise. Or if you do not listen to our podcast on Spotify, you could always email us what your favorite episode was of the year 2023, and we will draw from a hat 5 very, very not lucky, but sovereignly appointed people to receive this merch. It's really nice merch. I can't tell you what it is, but super nice. Anyway, so that is it for our announcements. Pastor Eugene, this being the year of 2024, what would you like to achieve this year? Is there anything that you would like to achieve? Anything that you'd like to improve on? Maybe a goal that you could share? Just so we can get the juices flowing.
Be great if our entire church could do the full Bible reading together. The whole year.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's going to be a wonderful thing to continue to study through the books of the Bible. I am particularly excited about Genesis. For those that don't know, our staff actually goes through a chapter in Genesis once a week. And we have lots to say, right? And so There's so much going on in a narrative that you can always be blessed by it. I think, who was it that prayed? Was it you that prayed today?
It was Brian that
It
prayed
was
today.
Brian, and then talking about how we can almost learn an infinite amount of things from the Word of God. I think he just said the word infinite. I think it's true. You can learn like a countless amount of things by studying the Word of God, and
Yeah.
we see that. So this is something I look forward to. I hope you're excited too. I think that's what a Christian is excited to do, is to just delve deep into the Word of God and learn, and then continue to be sanctified. You find where your true joy is, where your happiness comes from, where that contentment springs from. And it goes into every other discipline in life. Really, it does. And we've talked about a lot of it. And lastly, I would like to bench 3 plates, but
315.
that's a separate issue.
That is not an issue. That is just,
I
That's
miss you.
that's a great goal. Jizo, do you want to bench 135 this year or?
One day.
I'll bench 135 and then, yeah.
Did you notice the hubris? It's very, I think you should work on your pride this year.
I hope we can hit 225 this year, Sam.
Thank you.
But talking about the Bible reading, I think there's a lot of people excited
Oh, yeah.
to do the
Oh,
Bible
yeah,
reading.
absolutely.
I'm in a group chat with 16 other people right now.
How come you didn't add me to this group chat? I'm doing it too.
You didn't ask.
I
All
thought
these
we were,
people asked to be
I
added.
thought we were friends.
But yeah, people
Wow.
have been sharing questions and comments on what they've been reading in the Bible. And I think it's an exciting time.
Pastor Gene, are you in this group chat?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's only for the elite.
Ooh.
It's only for those who saw my Instagram story.
Only for the elite that can bench 365 and above.
So, speaking of benching 365, before I get to my goal, I was speaking at a retreat the week between Christmas and New Year's Day. And for them, interestingly enough, and don't laugh, for them, I was probably one of the biggest people that they've ever seen. No, and then
Right after you talk about Chinzak's hubris.
no, I'm not saying I am. I'm just saying for them, right? And they asked me how much, was your max, and I told them my max.
What was your max?
Well, no,
What'd you tell them?
Yeah, what did you tell them? Because we know the
there's
truth.
no reason for me to be attacked. I'm just saying. I told them what my ultimate max was, and I said, "Oh, this was like 2 years ago," and then I started marathon training and whatnot. And I told them my max, and they're like, "Wow!" They were amazed, and I felt so good. And then I come here, and I just get made fun of. But I realize a lot of churches in our area don't work out or lift like a lot of members in our church do. So we have a very special culture, I think, which is really interesting. And I told them, there's a lot of big boys at our church.
Did you tell them you're the smallest?
No, I'm pretty average though. A little above average, like B- range, I think. That's how would you analyze me?
65
65
percentile.
what?
Percentile?
That's failing. That's like a D.
No,
No,
that's
that's
a
like
C.
the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Above average, above middle.
Okay, that is the worst. So my goal for this year is to be faithful in the Bible reading, the church Bible reading that we have going on, and for me to also bench 315 easily. I want it to be easy.
Okay.
That's my goal. Anyway,
Like how everyone's resolutions are like the same here.
wait, not Chinzooks.
315.
Chinzak's 135.
Hope you get there one day. And I'm really glad that you brought up the Bible reading, Pastor Eugene, because that is what we'll be talking about for the brunt of our podcast. So, like you said, we have a Bible reading plan going on in our church. It's on our app. I don't know who put it on our app, but that's genius.
Brian.
Was it Brian?
Yeah.
I take it back. Was it actually Brian?
Yes.
That's terrible.
You think it's terrible that he put the Bible plan up there?
No, it's.
Because he has to give kudos to
I
Brian.
thought it was like one of the best ideas that I've ever. Because it's so useful. Because it's so convenient. It's so easy. There's just no excuse to not read it. It's just so readily available. Which wasn't the case for the majority of humankind, of our human race. And so, yeah, kudos to Brian for putting that in our app. So we have our CGS app in it. We have our Bible reading plan. And is it following the McShane Bible reading?
No,
It's a little different.
it's a little different.
Yeah, slightly different. But it is a 1-year Bible that we're doing together. And like Chunseok mentioned before, if you would like a chat group to keep you accountable, to keep you engaged as you're reading daily, please reach out to Chunseok and he will get you connected to that chat group. But I just wanted to talk about that. So, everybody, the new year comes, everybody wants to read the Bible. That's why Genesis and Matthew are the most read books in the entire Bible. Around February, March, when we get to Leviticus, it gets a little tough. Maybe what's a recommendation or some tips or some advice, some wisdom on how we can persevere in our Bible reading for this year?
I think one of the things that we have been going over that can be helpful, just as a reminder, is if you have any kind of set discipline, you always have to set a time. You have to not just set the schedule and make time, but you have to say, this is the time. So if it's from 7 to 7:30, this is the time. That's what you have to do. And that's what, that will get you through the days. And if there's a day that you couldn't do it for 7 to 7:30, I don't know, maybe Adeline woke up and then she won't let you do the Bible reading because, something happened.
Yeah.
That's a one-off. Mm-hmm. And then the next day you'll still have that 7 to 7:30. So for the vast majority, you just need to set aside that time. So even if, something comes up, that's a time where maybe 99% of the time you'll still have that time.
Yeah.
And once you have the time, once you have the habit in, that's when you recognize like, oh, I need to do this. This is a part of my not just my routine, but this is a part of my feeding. It's like eating.
Yeah.
Can't not eat. So when it comes time to eat, people are always like, I got to eat.
Yep.
Same thing with the reading too. When it comes time to read, I got to read. And so you want to make that part of your spiritual discipline. And hopefully that's like the most basic thing to me. Once you have that down, then all these other things will fall into place. In fact, this idea of discipline is so basic and rudimentary, so foundational that when you don't have it, the other things in your life don't come together. It actually falls apart.
Yeah.
So when you wake up, you say, this is the time I'm going to wake up. And when you sleep, you say, this is the time I'm going to sleep. When you eat, this is the time I'm going to eat. And those are things that will really help you organize your life. So for a lot of people who feel like their life is disorganized, it's a mess, you can't seem to put things together, then I think the first question you would ask are things like, what time do you sleep? What time do you wake up? Mm-hmm. What time do you read the word? What time, do you make your bed? Mm-hmm. All those things are very, very fundamental to discipline. And so the Bible reading should take a priority in your life. And hopefully this will be a new year where people can get that determination in.
One thing, and I'm glad that you mentioned the eating part. One thing that I was speaking to a friend about concerning, discipline and reading the word is, no, you never hear anyone say like, I didn't eat for 3 days because I had too much work or I was too tired. No one says that. Sure, if you were exhausted, maybe you didn't eat that night because you were just so tired, you just fell asleep the moment you got in the front door. But no, it's really not like that. It's very rare that happens. So no one doesn't eat because they're tired or because they have work or because they have other things. You make time for it because eating, you need to survive. You need to eat to survive. And I think kind of like what you said, we're feeding our souls and everything is connected. And so isn't reading the Bible even much more important than that? So why wouldn't you take time to do that?
Yeah. Man, like we said, we've made it so easy.
Yeah.
But and I think people will get it. That's not the point, is it? It's not about how easy we make it, because even if you make it incredibly easy, if you don't have the discipline, you still can't do it.
Yeah.
We can make it so that we'll put a Neuralink chip in your brain. So as soon as you open your eyes,
It displays.
Yeah, it displays it. But if you don't have the discipline, you'll still shut it off. You're like, I have something else to do.
That's very true.
So it's not about the ease. It's really about the discipline. And so maybe sometimes you have to make it harder on yourself if you really want that discipline in. And once it starts to get easy, here's my next step. Is it okay if I move on forward? With
Yes,
that?
absolutely.
So the next step is you have to go and improve. So you can't, let's say the first step is you haven't done Bible reading on a regular basis for a while. Some of us actually have, so I'll get to that in a second too. But once you get that discipline in, just doing that is not good enough. Does that make sense? You always have to stretch yourself because there is room for growth. So instead of thinking, oh man, there is no end to this growth thing, it's like, wow, there is no end to this growth thing. There are two different mindsets of the same, let's say, outcome. And we'll go back to the lifting algorithm
Yeah.
that we have, right? If we say we're going to lift to this amount, even jokingly, but seriously, let's say we want to lift to this amount, and we didn't have anything that would kind of deter us from a continual growth, we would want to grow.
Yeah.
For people that like growing, they want to grow more and more. And the same thing with the spiritual life. And so you need to stretch yourself where if you got the discipline in, if you got the reading in, you have to make sure that you're continually growing. Like how deep are you going into these devotionals? What kind of notes are you taking? What kind of questions are you asking? And this is something that I mentioned even in the staff where I think it was you, Sam, that would ask this one question. And I said, for a passage like this, I think the question is more important than trying to share your insights. So a lot of people, when they read a Bible verse or, do their devotions, they come up with insights, which is great.
Yeah.
It's not a terrible thing. I'm not saying anything negative about that. But sometimes the questions that you might have might prove to be more weightier and more beneficial for you than those insights. So going to that deeper level once you get there is going to be an exciting thing. So for those of us that have been doing devotionals and Bible readings every day for a long time, perhaps, or they just started and it's become kind of a routine, I think the challenge is still going to be there. Are you asking the right questions? Because I've seen older people that have been doing it for a long time, no questions.
Yeah.
That's sad to me. And so, what do I know everything about the Bible? So you want to ask the questions, meaning you want to seek God, and you want to be like, wow, this was amazing, but what am I missing? If you're not asking questions, because even as we read through Genesis, we've had a ton of questions come across the staff too, and I think that's an important part of our growth. So that's my step 2. Don't get complacent. You got the discipline down. You can lift a certain amount of weight easily. Well, it's time for you to increase that weight, isn't it? And so increase that weight. It'll help you
Get
grow.
that weight up.
Instead of continuing to do the same thing and then wondering why you're not growing. Because in the beginning, when you do a certain way, you do anyway. You just go to the gym, your body will explode. Your cardiovascular system will come into place. Your muscles will start growing. But you keep on doing that same routine, you'll become stagnant, you'll plateau, and then you'll wonder why. And the foolish response would be, the gym isn't doing anything for me. It's not the gym that's not doing anything for you. It's the weight that you put on. It's the challenge that you give yourself. It's the fact that you need to recognize it's time for you to grow. So, put on that weight. This is true for any discipline. This is why I love talking about physical disciplines, because discipline is just a science. It goes throughout, the sciences, I suppose. But this is what Paul really focused on too. He was able to correlate those two, the physical and the spiritual discipline. And so I don't think we should lose sight of that. If you first of all, get the discipline down. If you don't have the discipline, get the discipline down. And just know that, there's going to be an exciting time for you when you get the discipline down. Things will start to come into place. Your life will start to get organized. You're going to be so happy just by doing the Bible reading at the same time every day. No, go ahead.
Is there a sense in which, and I know we've talked about this before, but I'm curious, is there ever a wrong reason to read the Bible? And should we still read it if so? The reason why I ask is this. Obviously, we want to read the Bible because it's God's word and it's good for us. Not only that, God commands us. And we know that this is what we absolutely need to survive. But we go to a church filled with very, very intellectual people. A lot of people know a lot about the Bible, a lot about theology, and we are surrounded by people that want to grow. Is it wrong to read the Bible because we want to be, let's just say, as smart as somebody else? Or maybe we're like, you know what? I'm tired of not knowing about these Bible stories that other people have conversations about. I'm tired of being the last one. I want to know more so that I could, be a part of conversation, so that I could just, be here. Is that a wrong motivation? And if we do have wrong motivations, is it still okay for us to read?
I mean, there are good motivations. There are better motivations. I don't know if there's necessarily what the scenario you gave me is necessarily wrong per se. I mean, you could always have evil intent.
Yeah.
You ever see the movie Book of Eli?
Yeah.
Denzel Washington.
He's my favorite, probably.
They wanted to use the
Denzel.
Bible.
Like
to
King Kong.
That's not the wrong movie, but he wanted one of the villains, Gary Oldman, he wanted to use the Bible to actually control people because that's what he thought religion would do. So obviously there are people that have malintent when reading the Bible to use it for selfish gain. You don't want to get there. And I get it that some people want to catch up to their brothers or sisters. I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing because competition is a sharpening. And if you're sharpening each other, that's great. But the malintent would go in where there is no love for God. And
gotcha.
you actually don't care about God and you're reading the Bible. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case for people that read the Bible. A majority of the time, I would think that, I don't know. I don't think that's the case. There are some people who want to read the Bible simply to critique it. The scholars that we have, they have an agenda going in.
Yeah.
And so obviously that is malintent. They want to disassemble. They want to be able to deconstruct, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if that's not your goal, then hopefully you recognize that there's a higher goal than just simply being sharpened. And the higher goal is to love God and to obey his commandments. And so you continually come to that understanding to a deeper level as you grow. So I don't think people should think that I need to be a level 10 Christian before reading the Bible. You can be someone who's just starting off, and the Bible will be beneficial to you more than you could ever imagine in many, many dimensions. And so I would still encourage people to read the Bible, continue to read the Word, and then have a good teacher.
Right.
You need a good teacher to explain the Word. You can't just read the Word and then go away with your own thoughts. That's why God set up teachers throughout the millennia in his church. So always have a good, sound, biblical teacher that can explain the things that, you might miss.
Gotcha. And that's actually leads to the next question that I have is, if there are questions, or if we have thoughts or insights and we want to dig deeper, and you said, maybe go to the next level, be deeper in your meditation. How can we do that? Are there some sidekicks, maybe some supplements that we can use to understand, maybe some commentaries or study Bibles? What would you recommend so that we can have that deeper time of meditation as we read the Word?
I really enjoy some nice, like you said, supplements or complements to reading the Bible. We have our reference Bibles. We have our, what is that commentary Bible? The Reformation Study Bible. It's amazing. This is one that I can't recommend highly enough.
It's from Ligonier, right?
It's from Ligonier. R.C. Sproul was the general editor. And I think it's just a wonderful companion piece to have. I wouldn't recommend reading the commentary before I read the Word. So even in our staff meetings, when we read the Word, it's zero commentary. You can't have your commentary in front of you. You just have to have the Word. And then obviously we can look at the commentaries after. You never want to go against what the commentary is saying if you're just starting out. And, if there's thousands of years of people interpreting it this way, I would say it should at least give you pause if you have a new interpretation of it, which it seems as though some of these circles are now having. This means this in 2024, God will give you a year of harvest. It's like, what? And, that's exactly what it says in Isaiah 42. It's like, what? Nah, that's not what it means, And so those are things that we can kind of guard ourselves from that kind of eisegetic interpretation.
Yeah.
And we really want to be able to exegete clearly. So I would highly recommend the Reformation Study Bible. There are other Bibles out there that we've mentioned again before on this podcast. There's the NIV Study Bible. There's the MacArthur Study Bible. There's all these good study Bibles out there that can be a good companion piece when you are reading the Word. And there also, on another side, there's other devotionals that can help you. So if you're not reading through the Bible, whether sequentially or chronologically, and you just want to just read the Bible, it doesn't necessarily have to be in order. They have some good devotional books out there. So this past Sunday, if you came into our church, you would have seen our recommended books. Our recommended books, the theme for this quarter is devotions or devotionals. And so you could check out our recommended book corner for the devotionals that the staff has been reading through or have read through, and then you could pick one up yourself.
Yeah. Mine especially. I recently started doing this one. And I know we've talked about it before, but the Valley of Vision collection of prayers is actually just like straight fire. It's so good. I know we've, talked about prayer before on this podcast, and we've talked about praying the Psalms or praying the scriptures. But, reading through and praying through the prayers of these Puritans, it's so good. Like, they say stuff that I would have never thought about. And we always say that prayer teaches, and it does. This collection of prayers really helps you as you pray it, and it gets your mind to a correct understanding of who God is and who you are as you pray. So it's been really helpful.
And it's so like scripturally dense. I realize all those prayers, it just seems like a part of their devotion to God and what they're lifting up to Him, but it's just so in line with what Scripture teaches, and sometimes directly quoted Scripture.
Yeah. And it's crazy because people don't pray like that anymore.
Yeah.
And you wonder what happened.
Stop praying the Bible. That's what happened. You started to pray emotions. You started to do the shalalas.
Daddy God.
That's what happened.
Wait, that's what they say though.
That's what happens. And so I think biblical literacy is a key in really having deep prayers. And when let's say you are in a dry spell, the Bible reading doesn't get you for whatever reason. There's no devotions that really get you. Yeah, the Valley of Vision is great because you collect, these are collective prayers that they put out. And like you said, because it's so dense, you can't help but just think about it. And it has rekindled many a Christian's heart.
Yeah.
When they would read through these prayers. In fact, we did it for a little bit in our mornings, AMP prayers. Mm-hmm. And so we would go through one prayer from the Valley of Vision, and it was great. And so we've done other things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great. So, I mean, kind of like you were saying, Pastor Eugene, I think we have no excuse. This is something that's of the utmost importance. And like you said, this is something that we need discipline in. And so our prayer is that our entire church, like you said, would be reading the Bible together. And I think the beauty of reading it together is like the chat group that Chunsuk made. Like the fact that we're reading it together, we know what we are reading and we can talk about it. We can encourage one another. We can pray for one another. We could, there's so many things that we could do as a church as we read the same passages throughout the week together. And I think there's something amazing and beautiful about that. And so again, if you'd like to join an accountability group, please let Chunsuk know, right?
Yeah.
Will you ever cap it?
I don't know if there's a cap on Kakao Talk. It's only on Kakao Talk, so.
Oh, so this is only for the Koreans, huh?
No, anybody can download Kakao Talk.
And I mean, I let the chat group know if you have any questions, feel free to let me know and I'll pass it on to Pastor Eugene or bring it up on the podcast so we could hear from Pastor Eugene or any other teacher.
Is the chat group popping?
People just say, what they were struck by while they're reading or
questions,
things like, I read.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, it's like pretty amazing that we could do this. And I even thought about like the fact that I could talk to anybody that's reading or on this plan, and they would know exactly what I'm talking about if I mention something. Like, we're going to mention a question today, and everyone that's been reading would know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's pretty amazing that we get to do this together. But like we were saying before, if you have any questions as you're doing this Bible reading, please email us at podcast@cgsnj.org. And we will be discussing these questions in our Q&A section, like right now. So our Q&A section today was a question on Genesis 6, the sons of God. And it has to do also with the Nephilim. So, who were the sons of God? Who were the Nephilim? Are they among us today?
Why is that funny? Chunseok's a Nephilim.
Chunseok is not nearly tall enough to be a Nephilim.
They were huge.
How do you know they were huge?
Wait, them boys was tall, I think.
How do you know they were huge?
Weren't they?
They're giants.
Oh, never mind.
How do you know?
Well, that's what my ESV Bible tells me.
Yeah, but how do you know? How do they know?
See, I don't know.
It
So
says
there
like
were
they
still
were
remnants. Of
mighty
them.
men who were of old.
But this, yeah.
So I just assumed big.
Yeah, you people.
Wait, because the Nephilim are mentioned here, and I believe they're also mentioned when Caleb and Joshua go to look out for the land, right? When they were the 12 spies. When they go out, the Bible tells us the Nephilim were also there. This is the time of the Nephilim, right? And so they said we're like grasshoppers to them, to my recollection. Is that right?
There are also. What about Goliath?
The dude was from Gad. That's all I know. Was it Gath?
Gath.
Gath. That boy was like 9 foot tall. His spearhead weighs more than a lot of people can bench today.
Yeah.
So,
Well, there are multiple passages talking about, the Nephilim.
yeah.
And also, people have suggested that the Rephaim are, correlated to the Nephilim. And so that's where Goliath was supposedly descended from. That's why he was so huge. There are multiple mentions of Nephilim, like in Ezekiel and Deuteronomy. Oh, I'm sorry, Ezekiel and Numbers, not just Genesis 6.
And Joshua too.
That's the Rephaim too. And
Oh.
so, anyway, it's just it's different because it's not necessarily correlated with verse 1. So people tend to correlate that.
Right. So how does that even make, but like, why is that even there?
Yeah, why is that even there? It's great. Once we get to Genesis 6, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Well, could you give us like a little appetizer?
Sure. Yeah. Some people have said in verse 2 that the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive and they took as their wives any they chose. Some people have thought that these were angels. That's why they're huge.
Yep.
That angels saw women, and that's how beautiful women were, even to angels. I see that as a very unlikely translation.
Yep.
Or unlikely interpretation of that passage. So the passage it's very, very enigmatic. I'm like, you won't know for sure, I would think, until we get to heaven. But I think this passage was there, and we need to see it in context. It's between Noah and between how men were developing on this world.
Yep.
And so there's also, I won't get too much into it. There's also the things that Cain did, like musical instruments were by Cain, by the way.
Yep.
And so the things that we enjoy were by Cain. Like cities, it was by Cain.
But tents, the tent dwellers.
Yeah. And so like the technology that we have is from Cain's descendants. And so that's something that you have to look at and really have to ponder because we take it just, as a maybe just inherent good. But, we have to see where the origin was, and then we have to start talking about what that means. But let's go back to, 6:2. And who are the sons of God? I think the better question, we'll tackle it to a degree. I think the better question is, why are they called the sons of God versus the daughters of man? Why this juxtaposition or contrast? And I think it really leads me into the idea I mentioned. So I don't know if everybody here that's listening to us heard the 2 sermons I did called The End of an Era. And in the end of an era, I mentioned mutations and gargoyles. And so this would be symbolic of a mutation. This would be something that is coming together that shouldn't come together. And so I think that in the very least, we can say, does that make sense too?
Yeah.
In the very least, this contrast is there to show that something is off. Okay. And so if something is off, that's a mutation. Because if it was pure, if it was orthodox, then it wouldn't be off, right? And so what is it about this that's off is a good question. What about this being off? What will it do in the future? And what are its consequences? That's even a better question. This is what we see in the word.
So, in that same chapter, we get to the story of Noah and the ark. And I think the one question that everyone might be asking is, how come the lions didn't eat the giraffes in the ark? You're telling me that 2 of every creature on the planet went into a small little ark? How is this possible?
Yeah. Well, this is why people don't believe the Bible. A lot of people are like, this is so stupid. How did, lions go in and what did they corner them off? Possibly. I mean, we don't know for sure, but there are things that I think are foolish, thinking like the lion was right next to the giraffe and without any kind of intervention, they decided not to eat each other. That's obviously that's not what anybody thinks, right? Right?
Right.
I hope so. And so, yeah, I think it's important that we understand the commands, and the general principle is always so important. And I think that's what people don't get. First, get the principle, work out the details. And actually, if you heard the sermon yesterday, that's actually how I started. People are always focused on the specifics, that they forget there's a principle. And you get lost in the specifics. You get lost in that detail. You don't even know what you're really arguing about in the end, because you're always arguing about some sort of detail without trying to fully understand the principle. And so Genesis 1:1 should really, get us back into order what that principle is. And so after saying that, I would like to say that what God did was he told people, or he told Noah to get all the animals, period? Is that what he said?
No.
Get all the animals. What did he say?
2 of every animal.
Did he say 2 of every animal? That's the question.
Not every animal.
So he didn't get every animal?
No.
Then did he disobey God?
No.
So some animals just were left to die?
I think so.
Well, you guys are furiously looking at the Bible. So I'll just show you what I'm referencing. Let's say verse 19 of chapter 6.
Reads, and of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female.
Okay, so there is a scientific definition for this as well. But what we say as sort, and it says in the very next verse, according to their kind, it's according to their kind. Is not exactly, let's say, get an orangutan, get a chimpanzee, 2 of each. It's get a monkey. Or
right,
that's
so
what a kind would technically mean.
Right. Okay.
And so when people are when people continue to say like criticize Noah's Ark, and then of all the Bible verses, they have a ton of criticism on Genesis 1-11. But like I said, when you forget the principle and you just focus on the details, you obviously will just be a hater. I don't know what else to say. But even when you look at the detail, you're still wrong. That's the point. The reason why you missed this detail about kinds is because you were focused on the detail and you missed that detail, but you forgot the principle, which is the more egregious of, the crimes that you could commit when you're doing any kind of investigation. So if you want to do some true investigatory things about the Word of God, then you would have to know what principle it's teaching. And so that's what I really want to get down to. And when you get the principles, the details, it's not that the details don't matter. The details matter, but you don't miss the details because you see the principle. And so things like the words of kinds, we even have a scientific name for kinds. Kinds is above species. And
Genus?
so genuses, yeah.
Wow. Genius.
And so we are Homo sapiens, that is
people.
There are names for the exact exact species we are, the genuses that we are. But that is the most specific level.
Yeah.
But from there, could God have used some sort of microevolution to develop everything?
Absolutely.
Obviously. Like we are developing and evolving all the time. It's just the fact that we would really push back on a godless evolutionary kind of tree that goes, or a chart that goes around. But God could evolve creatures. Like, give me a break. You think the mammoth and the elephant have nothing in common? That's crazy talk. No Christian believes that.
Right.
I hope not, at least. But then, does that mean that God was outside the process of that evolution, that he would let an ungodly process take place when he wanted to create species? And I think the answer is no to that. And so I don't agree with a lot of the, posits that Darwinism would teach, like the survival of the fittest. That's not a thing. Like the rule of the jungle doesn't apply just simply because humans, period. That's what it is. When God created humans, that rule of the jungle is out the door because humans affect every part of the world. And we'll get into that as well. And so to understand Genesis 6, you have to understand Genesis 1. And if you really want to understand Genesis 1, then we have to get away from this, heliocentric or geocentric, thinking those are the only two views of the universe. It's false. You really do need a theocentric view of the universe and creation. And that's how, whether it's geocentric, heliocentric, all these other things will come into place. Otherwise, we are arguing about something that is both untrue. The universe does not revolve around the earth. The universe does not revolve around the sun. That's not how it works. And so where does the universe revolve around? What does the universe revolve around? It has to be its creator. It has to be whatever the creator put its origin is as, and that's something that we need to go back to.
What you just said kind of reminded me, the book of Genesis, at least the first couple of chapters, are probably, if not the most challenged, one of the most challenged parts of the Bible. And it makes you think, why is that? If you were the enemy, wouldn't you challenge the most important part? Not saying that there are more important parts in the Bible, but we need to get the beginning correct. And so what you're saying then is that all of Genesis, including creation, the garden, the number of days, the flood, everything is literal.
Everything is true. I don't know how to take the word literal.
Meaning it's not just some type of myth.
It's not myth.
Right.
It's not myth like the Greek myths. It is true. Meaning in every sense that God said he did it is absolutely true. When he said, let there be light, he actually said, let there be light. And it's true. But did he have like lips or lungs? No. Yeah. That's not the point.
Yeah.
So if you say literal, meaning he had human lips, I would disagree with that. Right. Because that's what some people might think.
Right.
Like he's thinking literally, like he had lips. And that's not what literal should mean. And so I would disagree if you thought that's what literal meant. But what does it mean that he spoke? What does it mean that he speaks? That kind of thing.
I mean, literally in the sense of the talk of the streets. Like, that literally happened, yo. Meaning, like,
Giselle was so disappointed with him because he was
you're just saying that it's not myth, it's not poetry.
Not myth, it's not poetry, it's not symbolism. It literally happened. It historically happened. How about that? Historically happened.
Yeah, it had to have happened in time space.
So, like, there literally was a flood.
Yes.
And people literally died.
Yes, there has to have been. And we not only have, I suppose, evidence of mass death, but the dangers of not believing it, saying that you're a Christian, I think has huge implications on your theology.
Yeah.
This is just for us, but Tim Keller didn't believe in a literal flood. And I think that really did great harm to his theology.
And he wasn't 7 day.
And he wasn't. He thought that you could get away with not saying 7 day. But again, do I mean 7 day, 24 hours? People like, you have to say 24 hours. It's like, but the clock didn't start yet, though, for anybody. What do you mean 24 hours? Could God do it in 24 hours? And I'll get into it, I suppose. I would say absolutely he could do it exactly 24 hours to the second, before seconds existed.
Yeah.
What does that even mean, though?
Yeah.
So that, to me, is kind of a crazy question. Like, do you, does Yom literally mean exactly a day? And so people have taken it to two contrasts and two extremes, and has to mean 24 to the exact second, or it just means some general time period. So it could be millions of years. It's like, no. I don't think either of them are necessarily the only options, for example. So I will share some of the thoughts that I had, and we could always listen to the podcast where we talked about,
creation,
young earth creation. And if I were in a camp, I obviously would be in young earth creation, because could God create something in the middle of middle age? Obviously, because Adam was middle aged. He wasn't a fetus and then walking around, and God taught him. God created him out of the dust. So obviously he could create anything middle aged or seemingly middle aged when they're not middle aged. So there's all these things that are out there. But again, you can argue about the details. If you don't get the principle, you'll miss the main detail. So instead of arguing about 24 or millions of years, you don't get the detail, you don't get the principle, you're wrong. And I think that's why people are saying Yom isn't a day, it means something else, because they forgot the principle. They forgot that God is the master of all time. And if he says it's a day, it's a day.
Yep.
Period. That's it. And if he says it's a day, meaning like generally around this time, that's also true as well. There's nothing wrong with that. Was it to the, it's a literalist that, would make you trip up too if you said Jesus, died and rose again in 3 days. Was that 72 hours to the second?
Like from when? Right.
Isn't that a foolish thing to ask? Because that's not the point. The point isn't, is it literally 72 hours? The point is it 3 days, right?
Yeah.
That means the sun set and rose again on his death. And boom, 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 boom. And then boom, it was the third day that happened. And he rose again on the third day. And that's what we're supposed to get from it. And so people miss the main point because they miss the principle. And no matter what detail they hold on to, it won't benefit them to any degree. And so, here we are arguing about, like, is it 24 hours to the T? If it's not, could it have been 23 hours? Could it have been 25 hours? I'm like, what's the point? There's no point in arguing that, because that's not the point. The point is, there is a set time that God called a day, and this is what we generally understand as a day to be, and he did these things in a day. That's what it means.
But isn't that whole argument, the purpose of it is to reconcile science with faith, in a sense. And the only reason why I say this is because I know people have, looked at the scientific evidence, like this seems to be millions of years old, but how is this, how could this possibly be when we know that God created this in 7 days? Isn't the whole point of saying, hey, 1 day could be millions of years, the whole point of that just to reconcile science and what the Bible says?
And it's just what people think. It seems as though it's this old.
Right.
This is what it seems like. It's not like they lived through the millions of years. No one can know for sure, but we can reasonably assess dating through the carbon dating mechanism. It's just a matter of, what the room for error is. And, for carbon dating, I think after 2,000 years, it starts to go exponentially, that margin of error. And so you can reasonably assess, I get it, but that doesn't mean it's literally that old either. And we talked about the whole volcanic layering too in our other podcast.
Yep.
So it looked like it was, thousands of years of sedimentary rock being settled, layered in, but it just happened over a few years because of the volcanic eruption. So it seemed like thousands of years actually just happened in a few. And so there can be a super event that can make it look like this. And what we're saying is, why are you discounting a supernatural event then that can make it look like it was a million plus years old. And so, yeah, you could date something, and then maybe you could date Adam to the prime of his life when he was first created, 46. And then he looked like he was a 46-year-old man, but he was actually 1 day old.
46 is still like very young in the context of his life.
Actually, it really was.
He lived a very long time.
900 something years, yeah.
So 46 is not even like scratching the surface of his life.
No, in a sense, he was a newborn if you put it in context, but it's not like he was a fetus. And so all these things, I'm just throwing these things out because people get so hung up on the details without knowing the principle. You miss the more important details, you miss the theme, and you don't even have the principle. So you're left with nothing if you lose sight of the more important thing.
So what you're saying is, it's 7 days. God has said it's a day. It's a day. A day is a day is a day.
If God says it's a day, it's a day. Period for me.
Yeah.
Now, again, you can challenge exactly what the day means. I'm fine with it. But I know a day doesn't mean a year. Otherwise, he would have said a year. Yeah. So there's that.
There's also that. Yeah. So, I mean, this is helpful because I think for people that are reading through Genesis right now, and I know I'm only focusing on Genesis. I know we're also reading through Psalms and Proverbs and Matthew as well in this Bible reading plan. But I think it's helpful because a lot of times this creation story and just the early events of Genesis are challenged a lot. I do have to say this time around, I really, really appreciated the genealogy in Matthew 1. Like really, really appreciated it. Especially as we've been studying other things like, the Edify ministry, they studied Ruth and Boaz, and Ruth and Boaz are named, Obed is named, David is named. And so it's just a lot of things that we've been studying. It almost feels like everything's connecting. And so it was very nice reading through the genealogy.
Yeah, I really, the 14 years 14 generations so that people can remember.
Yeah.
Also, this is your lineage now is something that I think people start to get. When you read Ruth, it's because of her faith. It's through her faith that God would bring forth Jesus, our ultimate Savior, being engrafted into then the vine. We recognize that even Ruth is, our spiritual mother, where we can learn from and really garner not just wisdom, but a lot of spiritual fruit and offer praise to God for it.
If you don't mind, I wanted to go into the sermon from this New Year's Day. New Year's Eve, during the day on Sunday morning, and also Sunday evening, New Year's Eve. And like you said, it was titled The End of an Era. And I wanted to just discuss some of the different things that you had talked about, especially the gargoyles. You talked about how everything that was supposed to be on the periphery, the circus, the carnival, has now not only come to the center, but now demands our attention and demands our allegiance to it. And I know you were alluding to a bunch of different aspects of society today where sin and just the effect of sin has come to the center and now demands our worship to it. And I know you mentioned LGBTQ as one of those things, but what are the gargoyles that you see in our society today? And why the gargoyle reference? You talked about, the gargoyles like on top of Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the cathedral. Notre Dame is the school in the Midwest. So that's how you differentiate. So we're not talking about Notre Dame. We're talking about Notre Dame. Why are there gargoyles there, by the way?
It's symbolic, right? Gargoyles are symbolic. They are not human, and yet they are not full animal. This is something that we've seen throughout the ages too, where people are not fully human in the sense where they have adopted so much of the world that they don't actually look human anymore. And this is what we've seen with barbarians too. So when you look at barbarians, they were on the outskirts, they were outside the city, they were outside the walls, and you look at their lifestyles, it was what we would describe now as barbaric. It comes from the whole notion where it's just bar. We don't get what you're doing. We don't even know how you're surviving, but you're definitely not living a good life. And so when you start to invite those kinds of ideas and principles, you hold them as your central ideology, you could tell like this is the destruction. Instead of the center, true center holding us together, we're going to take what was on the outskirts and then bring that into the center, thinking that that's going to hold it together. That's unheard of. And so when I mention gargoyles, I mention it in another philosophical sense where gargoyles still have a part to play. Just like Satan has a part to play. God has everything not just by coincidence. Like, whoops, there it is. I didn't know that was going to happen, but I guess I'll make an account for it.
Right.
No. Everything is in God's sovereign plan. There's nothing outside of his will, meaning he knows about everything and everything is under his dominion. And so that might be confusing to some, but I think the worst part is if you think that something is outside of God's control, then he is not God at all. And so gargoyles have a place to play. A part to play. The fact that gargoyles are now not playing the part that they were supposed to play, but they're playing a different part. Imagine putting the gargoyles outside of the cathedral. And we can have a discussion about what part they're playing at another time, I suppose. But it is going to come up in the Genesis sermon series.
Ooh.
But imagine you taking that and then putting it in the center. Like you taking that and putting it in the altar. You taking that and putting in the central piece of your liturgy. You would think that something's off with this place. Something is definitely off. You would think, not only is it off, I would think people would be outraged. What is this demonic thing doing inside? Demons belong on the outside, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so there are all these depictions of things on the outside and the inside, heaven, hell, heaven, earth, beginning, end, all around Genesis. Think about even outside of the Garden of Eden, once Adam and Eve were expelled, there was an angel with a flaming sword, right? Cherubim with a flaming sword, right? That's a part to play. Everything has a part in the world. But when you flip that, you will see, not just disorder, but you'll see a disintegration. If you start putting gargoyles inside the church, you'll see a disintegration of that church. And that was the point where we have now taken what was outside. And perhaps it's okay to go outside, look at the walls and be like, oh, look outside these walls. There are all these things out there. It's kind of crazy. Make sure we don't bring it inside these walls, at least to know that. But we don't even do that anymore. Nope. We're like, oh, that's on the outside. I love it. I want to be like the outside. Let me don that, barbarian beard. Let me wear what they wear. Let me act the way they act. Let me celebrate it and call it Halloween or whatever it is, right? So that was the point. The point is, what we saw on the outside, which would have destroyed society, which we kept rightfully on the outside, we are now bringing not only inside and accepting it, we are putting it in the center, which is one thing I wanted to lead up to this point, if that's okay. Yeah. I want to finish up with this point. So this is my posit. This is my, theory, I should say. But I don't know if you can call it a theory. I think people can say, hopefully you can see this is pretty much what it is. It's pretty obvious or evident. After I said all this, if you listen to the sermon, this will make more sense, I suppose. But DEI is the reason why DEI people are doubling down on this is because it is the new currency. It's the currency. It's what people will use to purchase goods and to, do things for themselves. It's like Bitcoin, but not really. And so, Bitcoin only has as much worth as people put money in it, right? So DEI only has as much power as people give it power. And so, but the only difference about Bitcoin and DEI is going to destroy, because morally you can't sustain DEI. And we went over that, but you're going to continue to see a doubling down on this DEI, because people have put everything they have. They have put their life savings on DEI as their currency. So if DEI goes bankrupt, they're done. They have nothing. They put their entire life and banked on DEI. All of their work is because of this foundation of DEI. You look at Claudine Gay, for example, like she has less papers than not just a tenured professor, let alone a president, but just a PhD student. Mm-hmm. And all those papers, the more we look at it, like those 11 that we had, or 20, I don't know, whatever it was, they all have, plagiarism in there. And to call it plagiarism is now, black discrimination or something like that. Why do we go from plagiarism to racism? It's because of DEI. It's the currency. Yeah. They can't let that go, because once you let it go, you realize that they have invested all that they had. They were all in on this, and they have a losing hand. So they have to continue to bluff and bluff and bluff. They have to continue to go on this DEI thing. And then, so they won't let it go. That's my point. You won't let it go because you put your house and bet it on DEI.
Yeah.
You put your life for the last 20, 30 years and bet it on DEI. What do you mean it's not working now? That's all I have. They have nothing else. And that's where it really is, you have placed the gargoyle inside and said, this is God. You've raised the golden calf and said, this is Yahweh who led you out of Egypt. This is what's going on today. And we have to be able to stand up and say, that's not true. It's just not true. It's simply not true. And the more you worship the golden calf as Yahweh, the more your society will disintegrate. The more we'll go into not just simply orgiastic plays, but we will die as a society. And the wrath of God is imminent on societies like that, especially when you spit in the face of God as overtly as DEI does.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure we'll learn a lot more through this Genesis series, which a lot of people are actually excited about. With that being said, I wanted to go into a quick current event. The current event for today is not so current. It definitely is an event, though, in that I wanted to address online Instagram evangelists. Recently, it has come to my attention that there are many online Instagram evangelists that are not preaching the word, that are eisegeting, that are spreading heresy and error. And of course, this is nothing new. We have Joel Osteen. He's been holding it down for the heretics for a long time. But I guess, there have been a couple that have come up, and these aren't even like older generation people. These are new, up and coming, young, hip, quote unquote pastors that are eisegeting and spreading heresy and error on Instagram, and they're picking up steam. They're very popular. So I guess my question is, how can we continue to be diligent? How can we continue to have wisdom and discernment as we consume these different things? And should we fight all of them in the comments?
That's what you do, right?
I tried a little.
Yeah. That's one of the things about the internet. We thought that the world would change and there would be like world peace. In fact, we see actually more division now. And we see the things that were on the outside come onto your screens and you think that's normal. I think if we go back to the whole gargoyle example, it's what was supposed to be on the outskirts of society, on the fringes of society, things that were abnormal, that were one-offs. Because of the internet, it almost makes it seem commonplace, right? And so you continue to, let's say something happens on the outside and then we all have it pop up on our screens on our phones. It's like we're seeing it right next to us.
Yeah.
It's not like we heard about it. This is something miles away. We heard of something like this has happened. So it's not like that. It's like we experienced it almost as if we're right there. And so that's one of the things that, people are starting to notice. And especially with these online heretics, what we see is there is no accountability for these people. they can call themselves evangelists, and we could get into that. Is there really an office called evangelist, as we saw is it Ephesians 4, right? With pastors, right?
Yeah. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, shepherds, and teachers.
Yeah. So there's evangelists in there. So we saw the apostles, we saw the prophets, and we know who the pastors, teachers are. So who are the evangelists? So some people are calling themselves evangelists.
Yep.
In fact, very unfortunately, that is the direct translation to someone studying to become a pastor in the Korean church. They call them the evangelists.
Yeah.
A very unfortunate title, to be honest. So we're all called to be evangelists in a sense where we're evangelizing. We're following the Great Commission. But evangelist as an office, does that still exist? And those are things that I think people don't know. Mm-hmm. The Presbyterian Church is pretty clear. We only ordain pastors and elders. We don't ordain evangelists,
right?
So to speak. I think some people have variations of it because they see Ephesians 4 and they want to somehow be faithful to it in their view, but it's not complete. And so some people are like, oh, who's an evangelist then? And so some people have said Titus. Some people have said Timothy.
Yeah.
And so some people say that, which I think is pretty good.
Didn't someone say Paul too?
Paul could be an evangelist and an apostle, prophet and apostle. Yeah. He could have taken multiple roles.
Yeah.
But one of the things is, when you don't have, whether you believe whatever or not, when you don't have accountability in the larger body, you're going to run into problems. And so whether you're a small church or whether you have no church, you need accountability. And this is something also CGS is seeking as a church. We need accountability. Otherwise, it's so easy to go into the realm of the heretics. And so we don't want to be like that. So these are lessons for us to see. When you see these online influencers calling themselves evangelists, but you see that they have no accountability, they're not part of, let's say, the PCA or something like that.
Right.
Then where do they get their credentials? Where do they get their affirmation? What happened? How did they become who they are? And I think it takes more than simply a local congregation, to be honest. I think it takes a larger body to give their ordination. And this is where, Presbyterian really shines over the Baptists. It takes a larger body to test and then to, really side with the affirmation the local church is giving, whoever the minister they're going to ordain. So I say that all to say, watch out for anybody who claims to be an authority figure when they don't have any accountability.
Watch out. Don't believe everything just because they say they know the Bible or they say that they're Christian. Because some of the stuff is dangerous. Some of the stuff is so ridiculous that you would never believe it, but some of the stuff is dangerous. And looking at the comments, I think a lot of people are falling into this trap. So don't get caught up in the comments because you start getting angry and then you start responding and you start like an Instagram comment feud with the heretics. So don't be doing that.
There was a cartoon show when I was growing up called Gargoyles that I really enjoyed.
Dude, me too. And there was a book that we read one semester. I know, I guess elementary schools don't have semesters, but there was like a huge gargoyle unit that we had where during our library time, we would read a book called Gargoyles and then she would bring gargoyles. So I went down memory lane on that one.
You should have asked, what is your obsession with gargoyles, ma'am?
I should have been weirdo.
Why should you bring them inside?
That's just what I said. Oh, well, yeah. Why'd you bring them inside, lady? Is what I should have said. Mm-hmm. Why'd you bring them inside, weirdo? But I'll never do that because I'm an honorable young man. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church Podcast. Join us next week as we will have a live recording with Pastor Virgil Walker,
Maybe.
Pastor Gene, and myself.
Who knows the future?
I mean,
that's true.
Yeah.
God willing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, you're
if
right.
God wills, we will do this and that. That's how we're supposed to say it, right?
I mean, no, but that's implying though. Yeah. See you next week. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.